This is TWiT.
This episode of Tech Break is brought to you by ACI Learning. If you're ready for a new career in IT, then check out ACI Learning. They offer affordable certification-based training that will help you launch your new career in IT. Individuals use the code TWIT30 for 30% off a standard or premium individual IT Pro membership at go.acilearning.com/twit.
Well, folks, it's time for the Bite. So it's actually an unprecedented move. The Securities Exchange Commission, or SEC, has actually laid down the gauntlet on corporate cybersecurity practices. Now, the regulatory body now mandates that publicly traded companies have corporate cybersecurity experts on their governance boards. Now, this significant shift is a response to increasing threat landscape and the escalating impact of cyber attacks on businesses and the wider economy. Now, this new requirement actually underscores a couple things: the importance of cybersecurity knowledge and decision-making at the highest level, and simply put, the SEC is ensuring boardroom decisions encompass those digital threats and vulnerabilities, as well as strategies to mitigate them going forward. Now, it's worth noting that these cybersecurity experts won't just be merely figureheads. The SEC stipulates they must have real and practical cybersecurity experience. Now, this aims to foster a robust security culture where decisions are informed by deep understanding of those cybersecurity risks and the potential, really, for an impact on the company and operations and the shareholder value. Now, critics, however, express some concerns, of course, about finding qualified individuals to meet these new requirements, given that the ongoing shortage of cybersecurity professionals that are out there. The SEC, on the other hand, sees this as an opportunity to nurture talent and elevate cybersecurity as a crucial business function. We'll see. Furthermore, companies failing to meet the SEC's mandate will have to disclose the reason publicly. And this move is expected to actually drive compliance and encourage transparency in corporate cybersecurity practices. Now, this mandate is a game changer, I think. It could be. And I'm not sure if it's going in the right direction, but we'll see. It reinforces the integral role here of cybersecurity and how it really plays into business processes. As cyber threats continue to really evolve, as we talk about each and every week, such as measures from regulatory bodies help keep companies and shareholders and consumers safe. We'll see. Well, I want to bring my co-hosts in and get their opinions here. I want to start with you, Curtis. Obviously, can you explain why the SEC is actually emphasizing the presence of cybersecurity experts on boards for publicly traded companies versus, private companies?
Well, I think that what we have here is the recognition that a cyber risk has become a key component of the total risk matrix of an organization, in the same way that financial risk would be, and that security is an important way to modulate that risk. So in the same way that you would be expected to have someone with financial expertise on the board of a publicly held company, now they are raising cybersecurity to that level. And that's a good thing. We've been talking for a while here at TWiT about the fact that cybersecurity is being raised to a board level concern, instead of being something that the geeks down in the basement take care of. It's something that is a complete executive level issue. The thing that's interesting to me is trying to decide what makes for cybersecurity expertise. For example, board members are often executives from other companies in non-competing areas. So if you are a public company in, a manufacturing field, would having a board member who is the CEO of a security company be evidence of that expertise? We don't know. Would it require someone with a particular credential? I don't know, but I will say, I read the article that this conversation is based on. They listed a number of credentials that are available, certificates and credentials. Many of the credentials in cybersecurity are what I would call hands-on credentials. Things like certified as ethical hacker is a hands-on kind of credential. Executive boards in corporations are absolutely not hands-on organizations. They do not deal with actually touching the levers and knobs of control within a company. That's the responsibility of the managers and the employees. And so if you're going to look at credentials, I think something like a CISSP would be far better than something like a certified ethical hacker. But all of this is the kind of thing that we're going to have to work out. And I suspect we're going to have to work it out with the help of attorneys as we go through the who exactly is qualified to fulfill this particular regulatory slot on the board.
Agreed. Well, I want to throw this to Cheever, because Cheever, this is something out of a little bit of your history, right?
So I got a whole bunch of fatherly advice from my dad. Everybody does, right? But my dad happened to be in an interesting position. The whole bit of air conditioning. Air conditioning is a very, very new technology. And he saw a lot of similarities in my industry. And basically he said, the HVAC industry, when it first got started, was the wild, wild west. Anything goes. No certifications. Anyone could do it. Go to town. Well, as we started getting fires, like the infamous, some of the original was coolants were propane based or petroleum based, and I can't remember the name of the nightclub. There was a nightclub in Hollywood, I believe, that had a huge fire, and it was because of the air conditioning system. That drove a lot of regulatory people, the legislation and so forth, saying, hey, you guys can't have this wild, wild west anymore. You need to go and make some changes. Well, we started getting, ASHRAE and the very other things. You had to have mechanical engineering degrees in order to design these things. And as the post-war industrialization really took off, the entire industry of cooling became much, much more regulated. I see cybersecurity following in the same footsteps. We've had this wild, wild west for a fairly long time. You've had a lot of people claiming to be cybersecurity experts and not really. And we're going to start needing to have more experience, more knowledge going from the board to the production line. So that's the point I'm making. We're not doing something new. It's happening again. It's happened to several industries in the past. We're going to start having to require some sort of certification or education. I think the academic world's going to need to play catch up because a lot of it has just been very haphazard. It's what a professor thinks we need to have. And bringing this into our future conversation with our guests, I think AI is actually going to drive a lot of this. Applying AI to human resource management is going to be a big, big step, especially making sure that the HR people don't miss certifications or miss connections. When I was with Xerox in Honolulu, our HR was in California, and a lot of things got missed. And I think I'm looking forward to asking our guest, Ricardo, is AI going to make a lot of changes? And, how are we going to apply it to how the world is changing?
Good points. Those good points. Now, I want one more question to Curtis here, because I think this is an interesting thing. Obviously, this whole thing promotes transparency and accountability. And Brian brings up a good point. We're going to need potentially have some new certifications. However, we're talking about executives here. Two questions. How are we gonna verify that the people that are on the board have the skills? How is the SEC going to even do that? And it's not just a bunch of bloat on a resume that they've added essentially, and some screen scraper went and pulled it and said, oh, this person's qualified. And number two, how is that going to ensure that, the transparency that the companies need will be valid transparency? It won't just be some bloat or some kind of marketing ploy, essentially, that they're basically saying, hey, we have a qualified person here. I guess I'm just missing maybe a point here that they're trying to do.
The answer to the first point, how will they know, is they have no clue. They haven't figured it out. I don't know that they're going to figure it out in the next 2 or 3 years. I think it will take some time to get a handle on this. And again, we know, being in the industry, there is a vast difference between qualification and credential. There are an awful lot, we know them, there are an awful lot of unqualified people who manage to get some credentials. In the same way, there are some massively qualified people who, for various reasons, never go to the trouble of getting the certification. So the two, there's not a direct mapping of one to another. That is the sort of thing that regulators and lawyers hate to hear. So they really have no idea. Now, on the second, how does having this individual, this mythical individual who is qualified, help with transparency? I think the goal is that you will have someone on the board who is able to say during board discussions, hey, we need to make sure we're following the regulations and following enterprise best practices for cybersecurity. This is especially important when you get things like notification of a breach. We have in a number of jurisdictions, and the SEC has some fairly short windows of time in which notification must be made to regulators and shareholders if a material breach has happened. And someone on the board who understands what that trip is. I mean, if you have 3 records stolen out of 100 million, is that a reportable incident? Hard to say. If you have 3 million stolen, then yeah, it's going to be reportable. It's the area in between where you need someone who really does know the regulations. And let's say here that a piece of the qualification for a board member is going to be not so much that they know how to protect BGP tables or how to make sure that your firewall rules are appropriate. It is going to be someone who understands what the regulations around security are, what the regulations around privacy are, and how both of those are met through partnerships, through supplier relationships, and through the overall goals and strategic policies that the organization has in place.
That's great insights. Great insights. I do want to throw one more over to Brian, because obviously he's a board member, and I'm just curious about this because obviously, are we saying that maybe from now on organizations are going to have to go find a CISO and they're going to have to pay more and stick them on a board, basically, or are they going to have separate people on the board? And if that's the case, if those separate people, how much influence are they going to have on a CISO or a CSO or a CIO if they've already tried to secure the network? So I feel like they're creating some hierarchical mess here if that's the case.
Yeah, it's all about chain of command. It's going to be all about chain of command. And I think it's along the line of, if you have a commanding officer that doesn't know anything, say, about fighting a ship, say it's a ship commander, and you're trying to tell the chief engineer to do this, that, or the other thing, and they have no idea that would blow up the ship. It's a bad analogy, but I think it's more along the lines of, the people that are steering the company, the big picture people, the board of directors, need to be saying, we want to do something. We want a direction that makes sense. And having someone that knows about cybersecurity so that they ask reasonable things or steer the company in reasonable direction, I think is going to be a necessity. You know, you can draw whatever analogy you like, but I've seen lots and lots of board of directors, or commanding officers for that matter, make some really, really bad decisions because they don't have the background. And I think that's really what the SEC is really trying to get at. They're saying, make sure you have people on your board that are knowledgeable enough so that they ask reasonable things. They steer the ship in a reasonable direction instead of steering it onto the rocks. So because things like, cryptojacking of your systems, if someone goes and invades your system and holds it for ransom, do you want your let's call a spade a spade. Do you want a Barbie doll making the decisions? Since we have Barbie in the theaters now, do you want a Barbie doll that doesn't know anything about cybersecurity making the decisions on paying a multi-million-dollar ransom? Probably not. So I'm having a tough time with analogies today, but I think I got my point across. Let's have people asking the right questions. Let's have people making intelligent decisions instead of just saying, well, that sounds good. I heard that on, late night TV.
Right. Agreed. Well, I think that does it for that. I think we've got the point across. I think obviously this could help, but in the same sense, I think they got a lot of work ahead of them.